Hi, everybody. This is Jeff Allen. I'm going to be answering a LinkedIn post here that Greg and Michael have done, and I think I've seen another one. It may have been Greg's post. I'm not sure, but a couple of days ago, and I didn't get to answer it about easy and difficult language to learn. There was a quote or something and said something from Duolingo that certain languages are easier to learn than others, or some other person said this about Arabic. Actually, the Arabic was one of the hardest, the second hardest language to learn. Someone else. And then this kind of came up again in this post. So I want to address that. Sorry, I got a cough, but I get this coughing fit that keeps coming up. The bronchitis hasn't gone away, but it sounds worse than it is. So I want to address this specifically from having been a language teacher for university students and adults, business executives for 10 years, English and French mainly, and also being a theoretical and field linguist, which means that I've studied and done all areas of linguistics: phonetics, phonology, semantics, syntax, dialectology, sociolinguistics, first language acquisition, second language acquisition, which are both part of psycholinguistics, and a bunch of other ones too. And I don't want to go into all of them, and I've taught them all. So I've done a lot of research on language acquisition and language learning, and done it as not just a researcher but also as a practitioner. And the in the research area, I've read a lot. I did my master's and doctorate degrees in this area of language. My master's stuff included language acquisition. My master's included my thesis included a special thing I called former language lexicon language acquisition and everything. So I've really done a lot of work on this and read a lot of it, researched a lot, and done a lot of field work. And I think that it's really understand that there's a big difference between language acquisition and language learning. Language acquisition is just something you do naturally. First language acquisition. Now we say second language acquisition, but we mean second language learning. Okay, and they're two different things. If you look at language acquisition is always spoken. Language acquisition is always spoken. Language learning of your first language is called literacy, learning to read and write. But that's language learning, okay? Because you're learning a code. But no one of all the languages, of any of the languages of the world, has had a problem learning their native language spoken. Okay, everyone managed to do it, whatever the language, whatever the seemed difficulty of triad consonants and whatever. And now some don't do very well in language literacy of their first language, which is a language learning process, because you're learning code, how to read and write. Okay. And then second language acquisition, either spoken or written, is always language learning. It's always difficult because it depends what language you're coming from. It comes to a lot of different things. So I kind of want to address these separately. So because all language people that acquire languages, spoken language, never have any problem learning their language, speaking. Some learn it faster or slower, but they have some issues in speech acquisition or whatever. But they all get it pretty, fairly within the first 5 years, pretty much. There's a few exceptions, and there's a lot of research out there about this. A lot of research in language, first language acquisition. A ton of research. I don't even start citing all the reference materials, which I could, but I'm not going to because I'll be going on for a long time here. Now, there's a lot in the language learning sector field by a lot of practitioners, researchers, and EFL, TESOL, TESOL, ESL, FLO for FLE for foreign language, French language, all these other acronyms and stuff. So tons in there. But of all the research that I've seen, I've never seen anybody that is a theoretical and field linguist who has worked on studying any of this. I've never seen any of them. I haven't seen any research that has said that which language is easier. There's just an assumption that all languages are easy to acquire and all languages are difficult to learn. It's just that kind of thing. I've never seen any comparisons on this for the reason that they're two completely different things. And then you got to separate the spoken and the written, okay? And then you got to separate the language learning acquisition and the first language, second language. There's a lot of parameters here. So now I want to come to the computer stuff, Duolingo and these language learning platforms. I've started. This is one of the first areas I worked in actually, and I was actually doing this early on, along with machine translation. And I'm kind of well known for the machine translation, but I was actually working computer-assisted language learning platforms very early on, in about 20 years ago, in the year about 2000. That was really early years, and there were projects about this that were funded, so we were doing it. And the thing to understand about all these computer language, I've used a lot of them. I've used a lot of language learning methods. I've learned a lot, worked in a lot of languages. I've learned a lot, quite a few. I'm a linguist, so this interests me by nature. Then on top of I'm a translator and content writer, all that, and all those things too. But I'm a computational linguist on top of all this. So, but I think the thing that's really important here is see that these computer-assisted language learning software programs, whatever they be, some are more fancy, some are less. There's some really good ones, really good learning methods that help you learn quickly, but depending who you are, okay? I want to clarify that. And one of the key things on these call systems, they're called, is that they're gamification things. They're really around gamification, point getting and all that kind of stuff. Getting things right, avoiding getting things wrong, which is testing, right? And we all know there's been a lot in the field of testing and testing methods and how to learn how to beat the system, right? There's a lot of that to consider. And when I was young, when I was 16, I created a method, a multimodal method of learning at 16, and I used it, and it's always worked. And I've explained this to my son. My son's the only one who knows how this works, right? Because I want him to use the same thing. But, and I figure out how to do this multimodally. And I don't want to go into all the details of that, and I used a lot of this when I was doing language teaching to apply it to others, see how we could use it. But the key thing here that's really important to understand is that in language learning of another language, it's all about methods, right? Language acquisition, it's just you naturally learn it. You're a sponge, everyone's a sponge. But in language learning, it's about strategy, learning strategies and learning methods. And I've written about this a lot. I've made a lot of written about these in different papers and things, but it's really about your strategies. And some people are good at doing gaming, right? I'm a bad gamer when I was a kid, but I've learned how to do it as an adult for my kid, who work with my kids and play with my kids. I've gotten really good at gaming because I figured it out, right? It's a strategy. And I've gotten really good at language learning, second languages, because I figured out the strategy how to do it. And I've really done really well in teaching people second languages, because I've taught them language strategies, language learning strategies, how they could advance quickly, and they were amazed. And I helped them to do it in a certain way and I'd help them adapt it. But I use some, core approaches, but then I would customize it. It always worked. But I figured out how to help people learn the strategy in a gamification approach, right? I help them gamify it for themselves. I use comic books. I used all kinds of stuff. all kinds of fun things. But it's learning strategies, right? Which we do actually when we do pedagogy for learning other topics, gamification, math, or whatever, history, or whatever. It's gamification strategy of learning topics, learning strategies, learning methods that help build the learning strategies. Now, some people are good at putting into place language association methods for learning strategies, or whatever it may be, at any topic, and some are not. I think this is the key. And what the Duolingo and the other ones are doing, they're putting in place a standardized kind of language learning strategy with a method to make that happen. That they're hoping that they can help you create a strategy without you having to create it and figure it out yourself. That's the key. But they're using gamification, okay? Point building. And so that's why you can see all these points and units and all this stuff. And I've used a lot of Duolingo. I've learned four language Duolingo at least. And once I figured out how the Duolingo works with stories, I figured out the whole thing, right? It's learning strategy. I figured out the whole thing. And I can go and jump into another language and learn it very quickly because I figured out what the story is, right? Because the stories are all the same. Same stories. Different words, different languages. Just different morphology, different grammar. So it's pretty easy to figure out if you're good at learning, if you got learning strategies. Like this is the key. So I think we need to be very careful assuming that Duolingo and any of these other Pimsleur or whatever, all Collins and Harper and all these different learning methods, and these are all they're trying to create a learning method helping you do strategy. And those that are good at strategizing or figuring out strategies and do it, they're going to be good at it. And those that are pretty poor at it won't be as good at it. That's what it comes down to. And people that are good at gaming, they're going to kind of win this stuff because they're going to be good at games. People that don't like that kind of stuff aren't going to get out of it. In general, I mean, there are exceptions, of course. But I think you have to put all this into perspective, thinking that these point-based systems of, gamification or whatever, have nothing to do with language. They have to do with strategy. And it has nothing to do with acquisition of languages, which is a natural thing. It has nothing to do with being a sponge or not. It's you make yourself a sponge, and then you make yourself use methods to it. There are lots of types of methods, like read, write. There's a whole thing when I was at 14, I remember, in biology, we learned a whole thing about read, write, and review. There's a whole method about that. Teaching you ways to learn. Association-based methods, all kinds of things. There are others called TPR, total physical response. I mean, there are lots. There's think aloud protocol. There are lots of different things. And I don't want to go through and name all of them. I mean, I could spend here the whole evening doing this in the restaurant, but and get irritated with my cough, my Halloween cough. But I think it's really important to distinguish all this. And this has nothing to do with how easy or hard a language is to acquire as a first language, and it has nothing to do with how easy a language is to learn as a second language, because it depends on who you are, depends on your background, it depends what your it depends on how good your sounds or not, right? If you can hear tones or not. It depends if you've got a logical method. If you're coming from a case logic system with a lot of cases, and you're going to a language that doesn't, it's a lot easier. If you're coming from a language that doesn't have a lot of cases, and you're going to a language that has a lot of cases, declensions, that's tough. If you don't have a system in place to help you learn that logically. And I figured out how to do it logically, and that's why I did it really good at Latin and German and other things, because I just figured out, I found the logic of it, and it made it into gaming. I just made it into a game. It was really fun. So I think you get what I'm pointing at is it doesn't really matter. I mean, there's no easy or hard language. They're all hard. They're all easy, first language acquisition. They're all hard for second language learning. Some get better, some are good at, some are not, based on all these other factors. Since I'm a linguist, I'm a phonetician and a phonologist, I hear things that other people don't hear. because I've trained myself to hear them. I actually trained myself in classes to do dictation work and got really good at it. And that's what I went where did my doctoral work on. But I can hear things that people can't hear. Even my kids, when I'm training this, they don't hear the sounds until I explain it to them, and I teach them how to pronounce it, right? And so this all comes down to is, and there are lots of people there, people that are good linguists, field linguists, are people that have really good hearing and really good logical and learning skills. The methods to help them learn the language quickly, especially when you're going to unwritten language where you gotta work on a language that has no written code. Then you gotta create the written code after that, and then you create literacy on top of it. So I mean, I don't want to go into a whole. I could send you to all my publications that kind of go in a certain order to help you get to understand all this, but I just really want us to be careful of assuming the difficulty or the difficulty of language is that these software programs are creating quantitative statistical data to help us prove if a language is easy or hard to learn. They're all hard. From a duolingualist perspective, which Duolingo is for second language learning, right? So they're all hard. That's why they're making it fun. So that's my thoughts on it. I may be completely off and wrong, and I'll accept that. But I think I've got it. I think I've kind of figured it out to a point. Having been a practitioner and a researcher and a field linguist and a theoretical linguist and all that too. And I've read a lot. So, to do a doctorate degree, the master's and doctorate degrees with long theses, you got to read a lot. There's a long bibliography at the end, which means, and you read everything you don't, because you cite it, right? So, so you don't just put papers in there because it's fun, because you kind of want to bluff, right? You do it because you cited it, because you did read it. So I'm willing to discuss more. This is a great topic. I think it's a fun one. It's been one that's kind of thrilled me for three and a half decades. More than 3.5, almost 4 decades now. Getting close to 4 decades. Next year will be 4 decades. I've been doing language stuff and other stuff too, but with a really keen interest on. I was doing learning language before that, teaching. 1983 is the first year I got to teach and do homework, do kind of grading homework. So it's kind of been a long time, and a lot of different experiences, a lot of different places, and software and manual-based exercises and language scoring, language learning scoring, creating a grid in that. So I kind of really thought about this a lot and try to create things that help us kind of manage the whole thing, figure it out, make it fun, make it easy. That's the thing. I try to do it so it's not difficult. I try to make it easy. Making the difficult things easy is kind of the fun part of it. So that's my thoughts for today. Thanks for listening.